Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sarah Wyant, the founder and editor of Agri-Pulse. I'm pleased to see such a strong interest in our topic today, which is the soy checkoff, building a stronger bottom line for U.S. soybean producers. We will hear from our distinguished speakers with their facilitated questions and answers. I'm going to make some brief speaker introductions and also encourage you to dig into their full biographies on our website. We also want to hear from each of you today, so please feel free to offer questions in the Q&A portion at the bottom of your screen, not the chat box. If you are experiencing any technical issues, feel free to use the Q&A function to let us know, and our team will be monitoring that and try to assist you. In addition, we will also be recording today's discussion, and the webinar will be available later today at agri-pulse.com. So let's get started. We've got a lot to cover. I'd like to begin our program by thanking our sponsor, the United Soybean Board, and start off by introducing our first speaker. Meagan Kaiser is the 2023 chair of the United Soybean Board. She grows soybeans and corn with her husband and his family farm on their farm in Missouri. In addition to farming, Kaiser is a soil scientist at Perry Agricultural Laboratory, owns and operates a precision agricultural soil sampling service. So welcome, Meagan. Pleased to have you start off today.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for hosting this webinar. You know, it's so exciting to be a member of the United Soybean Board, and it's an honor to serve as the chair. The Soybean Board represents over 515,000 soybean farmers from across the United States, and we're able to work collectively to move things forward and to provide education and research to help farmers on the farm, as well as promote soybean utilization across the value chain all over the world. So a couple of the things that I'd love to point out just as an opening here are some of the things that I'm really proud of the board investing in. Early on in my experience on the board, I got to go to New York City, and we were at a lunch, and a city official who was talking to us about utilizing biodiesel in the trash trucks in New York City stood up and said, "I want to thank the farmers in this room because we have an asthma epidemic in New York City, and utilizing biodiesel made in part with soy is reducing particulate emissions and improving greenhouse gas emissions coming from our trucks." And it really kind of put me on my heels a little bit when I think about our farm and our children. And, you know, as I look over our green soybeans and clear skies in my mind, I think about how I love that we're able to utilize our crop to improve the health of children in New York City, and how we can be so connected by the utilization of U.S. soy on so many different levels. It's exciting to think about the fact that biodiesel may not have ever happened had there not been a checkoff to really not only do the research, but then the promotion and the expansion. We now know that our biofuel volume will grow from 3 billion gallons in 2022 to 6 billion gallons by 2025. So seeing that growth is just very exciting. Another thing I think about often is that we farmers really depend on infrastructure to get our crop from our farm onto the truck, onto the rail, onto the river, and then to the global marketplace. One of the areas that I'm really proud of the checkoff for working to figure out what are the barriers of entry in waterway infrastructure. One of the things that we are able to engage in was helping to do the study, do the work, planning and design to figure out if we could dredge the lower Mississippi. So U.S. soy farmers put in $2 million, and that $2 million investment for planning was met by a $245 million investment by the federal government and the state of Louisiana to actually dredge the lower Mississippi River. Now, I understand, we all know that we ship more than soybeans on the Mississippi River, but this was just one example of how we could do research and education to ensure the reliability of the delivery of our crop to the global marketplace. Another one that I'm really proud of and I love telling people about is soy straws. U.S. soy farmers are maybe not always identified as being in the bio-based product arena, but I remember sitting in a meeting 5 years ago now, and there was on the news talking about, straws and pollution in the oceans. And so one of the things that, as a mother of a 2-year-old, I kind of miss plastic straws a little bit because, sometimes those paper ones just fall apart, and a 2-year-old with a smoothie and a paper straw is not a good thing to have in your back seat. So one of the things that we have worked on to develop is a straw, plastic biodegradable soy straw that is made with high oleic soybean oil. So now we've developed the straw, it works, it feels like plastic, and we're able to, now we're looking at the expansion and how we're gonna take that to market. But that's just a few examples of how farmers can come together, pool our resources in a way that I, as an individual farmer, never could have engaged in any of those topics, but how we can have a global impact and improve the utilization of U.S. soy.
Well, thank you, Megan. You really have such great personal examples of bringing these messages home. And that New York City one is especially telling about all the families that have been helped as a result of those investments. So I'm really glad to have you open. We're now going to welcome Steve Reinhard. Steve currently serves as the vice chair of the United Soybean Board. He's from Ohio, where he grows soybeans, corn, and hay with his brother, Tim. He also has a small herd of Angus cattle. Reinhard was previously an agricultural education teacher, which we all know is not an easy task at all, but something we welcome, and also an FFA advisor to help other young individuals learn more about agriculture. He served in the Ohio House of Representatives as a county commissioner and was a volunteer firefighter for 23 years. So welcome, Steve.
Thanks, Sarah. It's great to be here and be with you and Megan to talk a little bit about the great things that we've been able to do with the soybean checkoff. And Megan gave some good examples, and what I like to, continue on with is how we kind of set up with a vision and a mission for how we're going to kind of accomplish these goals. And our vision is a broad-based vision that we want to try to deliver a sustainable soy solution to every life, every day. And in order to do that, we kind of break it down into the mission and how we're going to invest your checkoff dollars to do that. And ultimately, we want to create a value for U.S. soybean farmers by investing into research, education, and promotion of U.S. soybeans. And last year at Commodity Classic, we had a Team Soy concept, and basically letting people know that your checkoff dollars may be doing a lot of work in these different areas, but we do it with partnerships with other groups. And that creates really the team that comes together to put together that return on investment. And right now our return on investment is for every dollar we're investing in the with checkoff funds, we're returning $12.34 back. So how do we do that? Well, we have a lot of different partners that we work with, and one of our biggest partners we're working with now is the U.S. Soy Export Council, or USEC. And USEC is creating more export markets and working to continue to grow exports over 80 different countries across the globe. And they really stepped it up a couple of years ago when we had COVID, African swine fever, and different things, and tried to increase markets that we didn't have access to before. And we continue to drive U.S. exports. The U.S. Meat Export Federation, working with especially pork, trying to get more soy fed into U.S. pork and then get that pork exported around the world. And the same with the USA Poultry and Export Council, trying to drive that demand for poultry. And that's animal agriculture is still a huge consumer of our product, and meal is that primary product, and just our number one customer there that we want to make sure that we continue to work with them to promote that. And then one of the other groups we work with that kind of works a lot in that third world marketplace, but then tries to build their expansion. We just visited a Cambodia fish farm where they're using in-pond raceways, and soybean meal is WISH, the World Initiative for Soy and Human Health, and trying to build that protein base there so we can continue to build it out and continue to use more U.S. soy in those locations. And as their economies improve, then they can also buy more of the meat and poultry products as well. Meagan talked a little bit about the Mississippi Project. That was a group that we worked with the Soy Transportation Coalition, and they put together a lot of different programs to make sure that we have a cost-effective and reliable transportation system, because we know that's still one of our competitive advantages that we have here in moving our soybeans. She also talked about her visits to New York, and we were just in New York last week. The Clean Fuels Alliance of America, we work with them trying to promote biodiesel, specifically soy-based biodiesel, but trying to look at how we can reduce those, as Meagan said, asthma risks, or even maybe it's something that could be related to a cancer, and trying to drive that demand. And we have alternative fuels continuing to grow in use, and I think they're going to continue to be a big factor as we move soybean oil forward. We work with some other government agencies like the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research, trying to increase our soybean protein and amino acid composition, trying to, again, differentiate U.S. soybeans and make sure that we have a competitive advantage to get those soybeans out into the world marketplace. Just to name a couple private investors we're working with, of course, Goodyear with our tires. That technology was also used, developed by Goodyear, but also licensed to Skechers. Skechers has a line of shoes now that have soybean oil in the soles of the shoes. Pure Bond plywood products. We're working with a adhesive in that plywood to replace formaldehyde, which we know has been a health issue in a lot of home construction, and those products are available at Home Depot as well as many more.
Well, thank you, Steve. Did you, I know you were talking a little bit more about also just the way that you've been able to build markets, and I think we've got some questions along that line as well. I'd like to invite Meagan back to the screen. There she is. And we'll take some questions from the audience. Again, please remember to add them to the Q&A portion of the site at the lower part of your screen. And I'm going to start asking a few questions here. And if you have yours, and we'll go through those when we see them in the Q&A screen. So let's just start out with you, Meagan, and Steve, feel free to jump in at any point here, but I'm going to show my age a little bit. I was around at the start of the soybean checkoff and was writing a lot of stories at that time when it was initially formed in 1991, some 30 years ago. But talk to us a little bit about what life was like for soybean farmers who were interested in getting this research and promotional effort accomplished prior to the inception of the soybean checkoff.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I think just listening to Steve's list of all the partners that we work with, we didn't have a formalized national organization and effort on which we could engage in research, education, and promotion. And now you hear this long list of working on everything from global hunger issues to bio-based products at the same time that we continue to nourish livestock around the world. It's really empowering to think about that as we farmers, we all pay into the checkoff, but I think sometimes we don't get to hear about the successes. And so that's something that the Soybean Board is working harder on, to make sure that every farmer can take pride in the fact that they have contributed to these really great successes over the last 30 years plus.
Thank you. Steve, you were talking about some of the opportunities to sell more soybeans overseas. Which of the and I know some of you have also just recently returned from overseas trips. Meagan, I know saw you recently, not too long after you had come back. So, but Steve, start us off and talk a little bit more about which markets you're most excited about and why.
I think, of course, we know China has been a great market for us in the past and will continue to be a great market for us going forward. I think one of the biggest areas, we just came back from the Southeast Asia market, and Cambodia is one of the countries that's really just kind of getting up and running on soybean imports from the U.S., and I think that's going to continue to grow. We saw a facility in Vietnam, a Bunge facility, where they were unloading soybean meal and loading it onto barges, which get shipped up the river and actually into Cambodia. Vietnam's been a great market here as of late, and continuing to grow. And then actually at the last part of that trip then is we went to Singapore, which is a more traditional or mature market as we go with soybean exports. But I think that will continue to be a place for us to look. I think, India just became one of the biggest, or now is the biggest country population-wise in the world. And I think that we're going to see an opportunity there, hopefully, to maybe help get some protein, into India as well. And, they have a good soybean program there now, but they're going to continue to grow in people and probably need some additional, meal help there as well.
I think it's exciting. I love, we often talk about how U.S. farmers work really hard every day to feed the world. And when we look at those projects in Cambodia, we're taking a local food system that they eat a lot of fish there, as we now know after visiting. They eat a lot of fish there, and helping to make sure that they're producing those fish in a sustainable, clean environment. It's building their local food systems that helps them then become bigger purchasers of U.S. soy. And it's the long game of really having an impact on global hunger at the same time as building demand for our own product. And it's a win-win-win. And I think it's really exciting. Again, something that we couldn't do without the checkoff.
So another question for you, Meagan, just in regards to a word that we hear a lot all the time, and that is sustainability. Talk to us a little bit about what that means for you, not only as a soybean farmer, but how the United Soybean Board has been embracing sustainability in your efforts.
Well, I think sustainability has been a buzzword, I guess, but it's been around for a while. And I think, as farmers, something that makes us a little bit different is that we think generationally. And as a soil scientist, I can't help but always go back to the soil. And I'm excited about one of our strategic collaborations is the Farmers for Soil Health. And so that goal is to advance the use of soil health practices for corn and soybean farmers. We're partnering with the National Corn Growers Association, the National Pork Board, and other partners. And it's actually funded through a grant with USDA. It's a cost share program, but what we're helping more with than just cost share is technical assistance, and that we can all learn together as we kind of go down this cover crop journey. But then we also have a market platform that connects buyers with farmers. So if you want to, purchase goods that come directly from acres that are produced in a way that you like and you agree with, we're connecting farmers and the folks that want to purchase those practices, if you will, and know that they're being produced in a sustainable way. I think that's a really exciting, we call it that bend the chain, helping to make sure that farmers can realize the premium of the practices that they're implementing. And I think it's a pretty exciting way. So we're improving our soil, we're improving for the next generation at the same time that we are improving our bottom line. And that helps us to be more sustainable in our communities.
And Sarah, I think one more thing to build on what Meagan said is we have the U.S. Soy Sustainable Assurance Protocol, and that's one thing that we found out even while we were in Southeast Asia, is a lot of those developing countries are even concerned with how their soybeans are produced and you know what goes into that production. And you know, we can say that we're the most sustainable based on cultivation and land use. And you know, we're producing more soybeans today with less land, less inputs, and that's preserving our natural resources there that we have to help you know, produce that product.
It was really exciting to be in Vietnam at one of the largest producers of soy milk, and on their packaging, on the label, it actually says sustainably produced U.S. soy. And that's when it really hits home that our sustainability story doesn't stop at the farm gate. It carries on to everybody who utilizes our product. And that's pretty exciting that we're part of their differentiation through our own.
And just if I may elaborate on that a little bit more, could you talk about the fact that what you're doing in Missouri and the practices that you're implementing here might not be the same ones at work where Steve is in Ohio, and not where my farm is in Iowa, that sustainability can be a goal, but it might be implemented in different ways for different farming operations?
Absolutely. We're a big country, and options are one of the things that make U.S. farmers more sustainable, and the fact that we can figure out what works exactly for our land and our location. And so then connecting the practices that I might utilize might be different than what Steve does, but that gives both of us, you know, a path forward to work with the marketplace to be more sustainable, and we can learn from each other. I think that the big part of all of this is, and where the checkoff is very focused, is not to just accept what is told to us, but to test it, to do the research, to make sure that farmers have the best information possible. And then we share that with farmers through our soybean research network online. And you can go, you know, even looking at different types of cover crops and how people have had success with them, or how, you know, what weather works or climate works better with different crops. And so I think it takes all of us kind of learning together, and the checkoff is a good central point for sharing that information.
Thank you for that. Steve, another one for you, just looking at all the different products that you have been discussing here, whether it's new uses with tires, plywood, we're seeing all these exciting developments. Tell us exactly, you know, how do you go about it as an organization, from getting this concept or even an idea, then working your way through the committee process, getting the research done, and moving towards commercialization?
Sure. So it's really a pretty interesting process, and we will go out and request concepts or ideas, and they may come from farmers, they may come from researchers, and they come from business like Goodyear. And so we have this year I got the privilege of sitting as the chair of the Value Alignment Committee for USB, and we take the checkoff investments and basically divide them out again across different groups. We have an infrastructure and connectivity group in both supply and demand, and same with health and nutrition, information and technology. And as those things come in, we kind of assign them to those groups, and they'll start the process in December with kind of an update on maybe where we've been and where we think that maybe we need to go, you know, to in the future. And then we go through the February process with our contractors that help us, you know, take those concepts and then put them into some sort of a program, so we can kind of build a portfolio as we head towards our July board meeting, which is where we come up with our final funding recommendations. And so we really try to build a portfolio of how these things can work together. Sometimes we have supply and demand actually working on different parts. They could be the same outcome, you know, eventually, but they may have different parts to deal with the supplier demand. And then we will vote in July to fund those projects, and then our fiscal year starts October 1st, and that's when the projects then can begin. And one of the kind of neat things about USB and our funding aspect is we only fund work that's already been done. So it's kind of like a reimbursement type thing. So we're not just handing over, money to different entities. They actually have to prove that they, invested that money in the research that we wanted or the program that we wanted, and then we reimburse them for that.
It sounds like it does take a lot of time, though, from the start to the actual, talking about tires to actually seeing Goodyear actually use soybean materials in those tires. Share a little bit about how long what's the timeline look like?
Oh, it just kind of depends on the initial concept, maybe a year until it even gets started. And then it could be a year to maybe 3 years until the project actually turns out a product that they're happy with. And then, then they have to decide, how do they want to implement that project into the marketplace. And at that point in time, if it's somebody like Goodyear, they can pretty much do that on their own. If it's a smaller company like Meagan, talked about the soy straws, maybe we have an additional program through our communications and education committee that helps kind of get them into the marketplace and begin the utilization of that technology and that product.
Thank you. So we're getting some questions in, some good ones here. I see one is referencing the American Soybean Association, which many of our viewers may know is the policy side of the soybean, where soybean growers go for looking at policy and advocacy. And if anyone wants to know more about that, they can go to the American Soybean Association. It's info@soy.org and send a question there. We're going to stick to checkoff things today. And one of the questions that came in was asking about a topic that really is generating a lot of buzz now, and that's sustainable aviation fuel, because of the comments that are the requirements and the commitments that major airlines have made to be more sustainable and to reduce their emissions. So one of our questionnaires wants to know, how big is that market, and how is soy going to fit? What percentage of it can be soy? So I'll throw that and see if either one of you want to make a comment on that.
Well, I think it's definitely a way, again, that soybean farmers can feel proud about having a real impact on something that everybody seems to care about right now. We're very relevant at the moment of being a solution. And so I see it, we grow corn and soybeans. Corn's going to have a big role to play too. I think exactly what that percentage ends up being will be market driven a lot in a lot of cases. And if everybody went to sustainable aviation fuel and renewable diesel, we're going to have to grow even more soybeans than we are today. And so that's pretty exciting, even with all of the other renewable oil feedstocks. And so I think the opportunity is huge. The big question, of course, will be, and this is where the checkoff discussion has been, is, what are, you don't want all of your eggs in one basket. And so we're lucky that we have two uses of the soybeans, two major uses, and that's the feed and food from the meal side, but then also the oil that can be used in bio-based products or in food uses. I think I think we're still learning more about what our opportunity is. I think that, obviously it requires that the public remains committed to sustainable aviation fuel and wants to pay to have that as a source. I think it's more realistic to believe that we would use more sustainable aviation fuel than believe that people would stop flying out of, a love for the environment. I think after the pandemic, we've seen that people like to fly, they like to travel and be out and about. And so I think that we absolutely have to be looking at renewable ways to, and especially for US soy, to engage.
Thank you.
And Sarah, one other thing quick there on the soy processors, I think, also recognize that market, and recently, you know, they've stepped up and are pushing towards 700 million additional bushels of crush of soybeans, and so that's going to create a big component of oil for that market. And Meagan talked about our partnership on the Mississippi River, and the other half of that then will be the meal. And we've also partnered with the Pacific Northwest, the ports in the Pacific Northwest, to help export some of that meal as well. So so we do have the partners in there that are also looking at soybean crush for that particular aviation fuel demand. And you know, time will tell how much of the 700 million will be built, but I know they're well on their way to start that process.
Very good. Well, it's an exciting time both on the renewable diesel and the SAF front to see how this is all going to play out, and whether the processing evolves, as you said, the production continues to expand, and then the infrastructure to move it around to make sure that that's all moving in sync. Ralph asked a question about high-oleic soybeans, and I think it's been an interesting journey for you folks. So Meagan, maybe if you want to start, and Steve both kick in here, but talk about how that has been developed through your efforts, and what it's going to mean to growers.
Steve is from Ohio, is a great expert here. I'm going to kick it to him first and then add in.
Well, I think the high-oleic oil market's been a long journey for USB, and but our update that we had a couple months ago is it's been a pretty good one. For the amount of money that we've invested in the high-oleic program, the farmers have been paid back twice that amount, and most of that's been in kind of a royalty type thing directly to the farmer. So they carry a premium, and Ohio happens to be one of those areas which is kind of benefited because we have a processor here that wants the high-oleic oil and has a use for it. I think there are 6 different locations maybe across the country that have benefited a little bit more than others for that. And not only do we have a GMO high-oleic oil, but we also have a non-GMO high-oleic oil that Meagan is familiar with. And so we do have that option as well. And then one of the new projects we have committed is the seed breeding programs. We talk about needing more oil and more meal. So we want to be able to produce more with less inputs. We were looking at producing those varieties that will go from the north, like clear up into North Dakota, clear down to the south, which will give us a broader range of maturity in that span, so that we can have more farmers participate in that high-oleic option.
Yeah, Steve's referencing the Soy Lake non-GM. That is really exciting. I got to go to a specialty soy conference and really kind of hearing firsthand from buyers of how important that diversity is of having the non-GM available is really crucial. Jim Sutter is the CEO of the U.S. Soybean Export Council, and he always says that the U.S. is the provider of choice. And so I think that having our commodity soybean, but then having the choice of high oleic, we're seeing feed trials with dairy cattle be a very big potential. We're seeing food companies enjoy the cooking benefits of high oleic, and then even soy straws using high oleic as the feedstock there. So I think there's a lot of potential for high oleic, even as we continue to kind of juggle commodity and high oleic production. But I always try to keep in the back of my mind that all of our beans in one basket isn't great. So trying to make sure that farmers have the information they need to make those decisions about planting, that we continue to build demand for high oleic oil, and then continue to produce the research that backs up the utilization from a feed all the way to a bio-based material.
And just to dig into this just a little bit more, when you talk about making sure you continue to build demand, can you give us some examples of how that's working? I know I've been to a couple of places where I've seen some demonstrations of using the oil and things like that. How do you actually physically do that, help build that demand on the demand side?
Well, I'll tell you, every time I eat a donut fried in Soy Lake soybean oil, I'm sold all over again. It's delicious. I personally think, but I think it's we're building demand. Yes, you have one-on-one. We work with chefs. You know, the Culinary Institute of America out in Napa, California has hosted several times where we're hosting not only, you know, Michelin level chefs, but even school professionals of providing lunches and showing them how soy can be incorporated to be, as one of our dietitians says, nutritious and delicious, and building demand that way. But then also, you know, we're doing feed trials with dairies to show that, you know, there's benefits to having the high oleic in the diet of dairy cattle. So I think a lot of times, yes, to show it, but also to exhibit it through peer-reviewed research, and is something that the Checkoff is very good at doing.
So I know that this was mentioned earlier, but another questioner wanted to know about return on investment, which of course everybody tries to make sure that they're benchmarking on actually how these dollars that are contributed by farmers are being used for research and promotion. Could you share a little bit more just about how you measure the ROI and your numbers?
Well, yeah, I think I always like to say it like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, $12.34 for every dollar that we farmers put in. We get a return on investment of $12.34, which I think we should be very proud of. You know, and actually our promotion work, you know, in export markets is a big part of that. And being able to have those conversations with big buyers from, you know, overseas markets, as well as having our domestic discussions. You know, it all kind of builds in together, but you can't sell something without getting to new markets and exhibiting the importance. Steve, you want to add to
Yeah, I was
that?
gonna say, yeah, that's a third party number. I mean, that's our whole mission, is to create value for US soybean farmers. And that's a third party investigation that we have to do every 5 years with USDA tells us we have to do that. And so we get a third party audit firm to come in and they look at how we've invested in the past few years. And like Meagan said, our export promotion program is actually well above the 1234. And so we use 1234 as just the average across the board. And that's an easy number then for people to look at and really kind of resonates with them. But you know, that is really what their checkoff dollars are doing and how it continues to build. Can't remember the exact number, but I know it's well above where it was 10 years ago. So, and so I think we're heading in the right direction. And with the new strategic plan, you know, right at the top, we look at our vision of partnering to deliver sustainable soy solutions every day. You know, what can we do to have every day you have something that touches your life that's, you know, some process of soybeans that have been involved there. And then we go back to the mission, and it's creating value for the US soybean farmer.
Very good. And then the last question I have, and this one is just more of a process, because we all know that your current CEO is in the midst of has announced that she'll be stepping down at the end of 2023. And Hugh wanted to know whether or not the process has started. Where are you in the selection of your next leader on the staff level?
We have started the process. We took some time to kind of survey and get input from all 77 board members and our staff of what we value in our CEO. We are very grateful for the service that Polly has provided us over the last 6 years. And, I think as we continue to move forward, we look forward to welcoming a new CEO, hopefully by the end of the year. Our goal is to have someone in place in December, and so that we have a little bit of overlap and some transition. But the big thing is to continue to have the input of the board. We've got 17 volunteer farmer leaders that are serving on our search committee. We have enlisted a professional search firm, Kincannon Reed. So if anyone's interested in applying, reach out to Kincannon Reed, and Jared Spader and Crystal Strauss are our contacts there. But we have started, and we're very hopeful, and we're excited about the future.
Thank you. I just want to add on a little bit more of a personal note as we wrap up here. And being a volunteer leader is a lot of work, and you're juggling decisions on big budgets. Steve, you've been someone who's already been a volunteer for firefighters and things like that. For both of you, if you would talk just a little bit about the commitment that you're making, and Meagan, you've got 2 little ones as well, that you're trying to make sure that you're doing all the family things in addition to the leadership. So as we wrap up, if you could talk to us just a little bit about the commitment that you personally are making, and the value that you believe you're contributing to the United Soybean Board.
Steve, I'll let you
Sure. Well, first of all, we have 77 members that make up our board, and they're all volunteers. And, to go back to what Polly has done over the last 6 years is put together a great staff that's really kind of brought our vision and mission together, and really has helped to, I think, get us funneled those dollars into the right places, and get really good portfolios and programs built that we can go out and really talk about with amongst the rest of the farmers. But, just real quickly, I don't know about Meagan, but, as you go up the ladder in any organization, the more time you spend, doing things. And that's a nice thing about USB is we need to have people everywhere. And depending on what your, situation is at home, maybe you can or can't be more active. But I would assume that probably, January to February, or January to March, and then probably almost all the summer so far, I can pretty much say you're spending about every other day away from the farm almost, it seems like, to carry out the work of the United Soybean Board. And it's rewarding in a way, because you get to be a part of this great organization, the things that we do. But some days it does take a little bit of toll on everybody that's behind, and has to kind of pick up the slack there while you're gone. But
yeah, we're lucky that we have such a big board and a really deep bench of very talented and committed individuals. And I thank them every time that I get up to the podium, because it is a lot of even not just going to meetings or even the travel, but it requires a lot of thought, a lot of reading. And it's weighty, because we're trying to act in the best interests of 515,000 soybean farmers who are all probably pretty opinionated, just like we are. And so I'm one of the younger members of the board, and so I can appreciate how hard it is with young children to take the time away. But I also think that, and I have to believe this, but I think that showing the example to my kids, that, Mark and I work really hard together to be able to volunteer in this way, because we have to think bigger than ourselves. It's probably more comfortable to be home every night, but that's not a good way to be a community member. And I do find it inspiring to know that we're part of something so much bigger than our own farms, that we don't get bogged down in the everyday quite so badly, because we know that You know, some of our sacrifices and our hard work, they mean something to people all over the world, that in countries we've never been, and people we've never met. And you know, I think that it's good to show that. I'll also say, like, Steve and I have raised our hands a lot to move up to vice chair and chair. That's not required of every member of the board. And I often say this when we have new board members come on, do what you can, but you're not required to be at everything. If you want to be, you're going to be welcomed. But you know, again, we have a lot of folks here working together. And so I wouldn't let the time commitment scare people away. The biggest thing is being thoughtful and willing to hop on a Zoom and be a part of really driving our own destiny. And that sounds really haughty, but you know, as a farmer, we're price takers on inputs and outputs. And the only way that we really get to change what happens to us is by being a part of this checkoff and deciding where we're going to make our greatest investments and how that's going to move the needle, not only for us, but our kids and hopefully one day their kids too.
Well, thank you both for taking so much time with us today. We had planned to stop at 12:45, and we're right on the number here, maybe a minute over. But thank you for all the information that you provided, and thank you to the United Soybean Board for sponsoring this conversation. As I mentioned at the top, we're going to try to make sure that we have this video available on agri-pulse.com by the end of the day. And then you can watch the recording or share it with your friends in case some of them missed it. It will send an email out to anybody who registered for the event. And again, I just appreciate the conversation, the dedication that you bring as volunteers, and appreciate everybody who signed on to listen and learn a little bit more about how the soybean checkoff works. So thank you all. Have a great day.